Islam spread across vast regions of the world over centuries through a variety of peaceful and organic means that did not rely on force or coercion. One of the most significant ways Islam expanded was through trade. Muslim merchants and traders traveled extensively across Asia, Africa, and Europe, carrying not just goods like spices and textiles, but also ideas, values, and religious teachings. Their ethical conduct, fairness in business, and commitment to trustworthiness left a deep impression on local populations. In places like Southeast Asia, particularly Indonesia and Malaysia, Islam spread primarily through trade routes rather than through any form of military conquest. Another major factor in the spread of Islam was the role of Sufi missionaries. Sufis emphasized personal piety, spiritual connection with God, and a compassionate approach to teaching, which resonated deeply with many people. Their adaptability to local cultures, use of local languages, and willingness to engage with pre-existing beliefs helped integrate Islam into various societies in a non-confrontational way. Sufi lodges became centers of community, education, and charity, further endearing Islam to the populations they encountered. Intermarriage also played a role in the spread of Islam. Muslim traders and settlers who married local women often introduced Islamic practices to their families and communities, which gradually adopted these new religious customs over generations. This organic method of integration helped Islam take root in diverse societies, blending with local traditions and cultures rather than replacing them by force. Education was another vital avenue for the spread of Islam. Islamic scholars established schools, libraries, and centers of learning in cities across the Islamic world. The appeal of Islamic education attracted students from various backgrounds, who then brought the religion back to their homelands. Institutions such as Al-Azhar University in Cairo became prestigious centers for religious and scientific studies, drawing people from far and wide and contributing to the faith's dissemination. Additionally, the appeal of Islam's teachings contributed to its spread. Its emphasis on monotheism, social justice, charity, and community appealed to many who were dissatisfied with the existing social or religious structures. The concept of equality before God, in particular, attracted the marginalized and the oppressed in various societies. Even in areas that came under Muslim rule, conversion was rarely forced. Historical records show that in many regions, non-Muslims continued to live under Islamic governance with religious autonomy, as long as they paid a tax known as jizya. This allowed Jews, Christians, Zoroastrians, Hindus, and others to maintain their beliefs while interacting with Muslim neighbors. Over time, many of these communities gradually adopted Islam through exposure, intermingling, and admiration rather than through any coercive measures. The cultural achievements of the Islamic world, such as advancements in medicine, astronomy, mathematics, architecture, and literature, also played a subtle yet influential role in attracting people to faith. The flourishing of Islamic civilization during the Golden Age inspired many to learn more about the religion that seemed to foster such progress and intellectual growth. Overall, Islam spread was predominantly a result of its spiritual message, the conduct of its followers, and the organic social interactions that emerge over centuries. Coexistence, commerce, culture, and compassion were the pillars upon which its peaceful expansion was built. Another important element in the peaceful spread of Islam was the establishment of just and efficient governance in areas under Muslim control. When new regions came under Islamic rule, the local populations often found the administrative systems to be fairer and more just compared to previous regimes. Islamic governance emphasized justice, ADL, accountability, and protection of the rights of all citizens, including non-Muslims. This created an environment of relative stability and tolerance, which encouraged many to convert voluntarily, seeing Islam not as an oppressive force but as a source of order and equity. Social mobility also played a significant role. In many societies, conversion to Islam opened doors to social, political, and economic opportunities. While this wasn't a direct form of coercion, it made the religion more appealing to those seeking better prospects in life. Access to education, participation in administrative roles, and trade benefits often became more available to those who embraced Islam, which led to gradual, voluntary conversions over time. In parts of sub-Saharan Africa, Islam was adopted by kings and tribal leaders who then promoted it among their people. However, even in these cases, conversion was often a political and cultural decision rather than one enforced by violence. African rulers were drawn to the organizational and intellectual advantages that came with Islam, particularly the literacy, legal codes, and international trade networks it provided. This top-down acceptance led to a slow but steady diffusion of the religion through society, often blending with existing beliefs and practices in a way that was both respectful and adaptive. Islam also spread through personal relationships and community networks. The role of everyday Muslims, artisans, farmers, scholars, poets, and travelers should not be underestimated. Their daily interactions, acts of kindness, and ethical behavior often did more to inspire curiosity and respect for Islam than formal preaching. In many cases, people converted after years of observing the sincerity and integrity of Muslim neighbors, family members, or local leaders. Additionally, translations of Islamic texts and the writing of local scholars in native languages helped make Islamic theology and philosophy more accessible to non-Arab populations. This intellectual outreach broke down barriers and allowed Islam to be understood in culturally relevant ways. Far from being a monolithic imposition, Islam often took on unique regional flavors as it adapted to different societies, enriching both the religion and the cultures it encountered. The historical record consistently shows that forced conversions were rare and widely discouraged by Islamic law and teachings. The Quran explicitly states, "There is no compulsion in religion," 2:256, and this principle was reflected in many policies of Islamic rulers. While there were certainly political conflicts and wars throughout Islamic history, the religion's core message was spread far more effectively through non-violent means rooted in dialogue, respect, and mutual exchange. In summary, the spread of Islam without force is one of the most remarkable aspects of its history. Through trade, travel, education, spiritual outreach, social integration, and the powerful example of ethical living, Islam reached hearts and minds across continents. One subtle but profound influence came through the Arabic language and the Quran. Even for non-Arab societies, learning Arabic for religious purposes became a gateway to broad engagement with Islamic theology, science, and philosophy. The memorization and recitation of the Quran, which is a highly revered act in Islam, brought people closer to the faith through its poetic structure and moral teachings. Over time, this familiarity often led to genuine spiritual interest and eventual conversion, particularly among young learners and students. The printing of Islamic literature and the building of mosques in distant lands also provided welcoming spaces for exploration and learning. In these mosques, newcomers could ask questions, attend sermons, and interact with Muslim scholars or imams, gaining exposure in a non-threatening environment. Mosques were not just places of worship. They were centers of community life, offering shelter, food, education, and mediation in disputes. Their openness and inclusivity made them inviting to people from all walks of life, fostering trust and, ultimately, faith. The legacy of peaceful Islamic empires such as the Mali Empire in West Africa, the Sultanate of Malacca in Southeast Asia, and the Mughal Empire in India also reveals how Islam flourished through cultural synthesis and tolerance. These empires often supported multi-religious societies, where Islam coexisted with Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, and indigenous belief systems. Islamic rulers in these regions often patronized art, architecture, poetry, and interfaith dialogue, showing that religious plurality could thrive under Islamic leadership. These examples contradict the notion that Islam's expansion relied on suppression or conversion by the sword. Moreover, Islamic values of compassion, charity, zakat, and care for the needy strongly appeal to people suffering under systems of social inequality. Many found in Islam a path to dignity and community support that may have been absent in their previous social or religious settings. The egalitarian spirit of Islam, that all believers are equal in the eyes of God, empowered the disenfranchised and gave them a sense of identity and belonging that transcended tribal, ethnic, or economic divides. The stories of individual converts, both historical and modern, also paint a picture of how Islam reaches people through introspection, personal connections, and intellectual exploration. Philosophers, poets, and seekers from various traditions have found meaning in Islam's spiritual discipline, its focus on inner peace, and its balance between devotion and reason. These deeply personal journeys are often more reflective of how Islam spread than the sweeping narratives of conquest sometimes emphasized in popular history. In the modern world, Islam continues to grow primarily through peaceful means, through dialogue, charity work, interfaith initiatives, and the personal example of Muslims in everyday life. Whether through humanitarian efforts, academic contributions, or simply being good neighbors, Muslims today carry forward the same legacy of nonviolent outreach that has characterized the religion's most enduring growth over centuries. Ultimately, the spread of Islam without force is a testament to the power of authentic connection, ethical living, and the resonance of spiritual truth. It reveals a history not of domination, but of dialogue, not of conquest, but of conviction, not of coercion, but of compassion. This peaceful expansion of Islam is further exemplified in how the religion embraced and preserved local cultures rather than erasing them. Unlike many colonial systems or forced religious conversions in history, Islamic expansion often allowed local languages, customs, and traditions to flourish alongside the new faith. For instance, in regions like Persia, India, Indonesia, and part of Africa, Islamic art, poetry, architecture, and even religious expression took on unique forms deeply rooted in local culture. This adaptability made Islam feel less like a foreign imposition and more like a natural evolution of the society's spiritual and cultural identity. In India, for example, Islam coexisted with predominantly Hindu population for centuries. While there were certainly political tensions at times, as is true in any region with diverse populations, the spread of Islam itself was largely facilitated by Sufi saints who lived simple, spiritual lives, preached in local languages, and engaged directly with the people. They were accessible, relatable, and deeply respected even by non-Muslims. Their shrines often became centers of interfaith gatherings and mutual respect, illustrating how Islam could serve as a bridge rather than a barrier between different religious communities. In China, Islam was brought by Muslim traders along the Silk Road as early as the 7th century. Chinese Muslims, known as Hui people, integrated into Chinese society over centuries. They adopted Chinese names, wrote Islamic texts using Chinese characters, and contributed to various fields like medicine, astronomy, and military leadership. Their peaceful integration into Chinese society highlights yet another case of Islam spreading without any form of conquest or compulsion, relying instead on personal example and societal contribution. Even in the Ottoman Empire, one of the most powerful Muslim empires in history, Islam was not imposed on the diverse religious groups under its rule. The empire maintained a millet system where different religious communities, Orthodox Christians, Jews, Armenians, and others, were allowed to govern themselves in matters of religion, law, and education. This system promoted coexistence and allowed Islam to be practiced and respected without needing to displace other faiths. In sub-Saharan Africa, Islamic teachings were often transmitted orally through storytelling, music, and communal gatherings. Islamic scholars in places like Timbuktu wrote thousands of manuscripts on theology, law, science, and ethics, many of which still exist today. The peaceful spread of Islam in West Africa through education, cultural exchange, and community leadership left a lasting impact that is still visible in the region's strong Islamic identity. In more recent times, especially in the West, Islam has grown significantly not through any form of institutional support or political power, but through personal exploration and conversion. Many individuals, particularly in Europe and North America, have embraced Islam after deep study, personal reflection, or interaction with Muslim friends, colleagues, or communities. Converts often cite the clarity of Islamic monotheism, the discipline of daily prayer, and the sense of spiritual purpose as reasons for their embrace of the faith. The role of Islamic charity and humanitarian work cannot be overlooked either. Across the world, Muslim organizations provide disaster relief, build schools and hospitals, and offer support to the needy regardless of their religion. These acts of service and compassion often lead to positive relationships and open doors for dialogue, helping to dispel misconceptions and foster understanding. In essence, the story of Islam's spread without force is not just about history. It is a reflection of how values like hospitality, justice, sincerity, and humility can move hearts far more effectively than power or pressure. It shows how faith, when shared with wisdom and respect, can cross borders, bridge cultures, and endure through the most turbulent times. Islam's peaceful expansion stands as a powerful reminder that the most transformative change often begins with simple human connection and a sincere desire to share what one believes, not to dominate, but to inspire. Another key dimension of Islam's peaceful spread lies in its emphasis on community, ummah, and the social bonds that naturally grow from shared values, practices, and mutual support. Islam offers a sense of belonging that transcends tribal, ethnic, and national identities. In many regions, this unifying force appealed deeply to people living in fractured or hierarchical societies. The Islamic emphasis on unity, brotherhood, and collective responsibility gave rise to inclusive communities where new members, regardless of their background, could find acceptance and purpose. This sense of unity was especially significant in societies where people were marginalized, whether economically, socially, or spiritually. Islam's message that all humans are equal in the eyes of God gave voice to the voiceless and offered dignity to the downtrodden. In this way, the religion spread not as a doctrine forced from above, but as a movement embraced from below, by those who found in it a transformative message of hope, justice, and mercy. Education continued to play a central role, not only through formal schools and religious instruction, but also through mentorship, storytelling, and community learning. Traveling scholars, known as ulama, would visit villages and cities to teach Islamic jurisprudence, ethics, and theology. Their visits were often seen as blessings, drawing people together in communal settings where knowledge was freely shared. This organic process of learning and engagement allowed Islam to be understood at the grassroots level, rather than simply dictated from a distance. The arts, too, became a subtle but powerful vehicle for conveying Islamic principles and aesthetics. Calligraphy, poetry, music, and architecture all carried Islamic influence while reflecting local cultural expressions. For example, in Persia, poets like Rumi and Hafiz wrote deeply spiritual works inspired by Islamic mysticism, which resonated across religious boundaries. In South Asia, Qawwali music became a Sufi form of devotion that attracted both Muslims and non-Muslims to gatherings of remembrance, dhikr, where the love of God was a central theme. Through beauty and creativity, Islam entered the heart of people in ways that sermons alone could not achieve. Hospitality, a core value in many Muslim cultures, also played a role in how Islam spread. In regions like Central Asia, North Africa, and the Middle East, offering food, shelter, and protection to travelers was seen as both a cultural and religious obligation. Through these warm and generous interactions, Islam was not just preached, it was lived. Travelers, traders, and wanderers encountered the faith not through coercion, but through kindness and generosity that left lasting impressions. One cannot overlook the importance of women in this story. While often underrepresented in historical narratives, women played crucial roles in the transmission of Islamic knowledge, values, and practices within families and communities. Mothers taught their children how to pray, read the Quran, and live ethically. Female scholars, particularly in the early Islamic world, were respected teachers of hadith, sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, and often taught both men and women in respected circles. Their contributions helped embed Islamic principles deeply into family life, ensuring that the religion was passed down not just through institutions, but through love, memory, and everyday care. The peaceful spread of Islam also benefited from the religion's inherent universality. It did not require abandoning one's ethnic identity, language, or heritage. Instead, it embraced diversity as part of its theological worldview. The Quran acknowledges different peoples and tribes as part of God's design, saying, "O mankind, indeed we have created you from male and female and made you peoples and tribes that you may know one another." 49:13. This inclusive outlook made Islam appealing to many who sought spiritual guidance without the pressure of cultural assimilation. In conclusion, the spread of Islam without force is a profound example of how faith can travel through compassion, character, knowledge, and sincere human connection. From West Africa to Southeast Asia, from the steppes of Central Asia to the coast of East Africa, Islam's growth was powered by peaceful encounters, heartfelt conversions, and mutual respect. It is a story not of conquest, but of invitation, not of dominance, but of dialogue, and it continues to unfold today in countless quiet, meaningful ways across the world.